Hello, class. This is Dr. Tyler again, and this session we will look at the prophetic book of Obadiah in the Old Testament. By the way, I hope you were able to glean much from the introductory material about the prophetic books. And now we're actually going to look into one of the earliest writing prophets, Obadiah, today. So let's go ahead and jump right in. And I had a subtitle under, under Obadiah: Pride Comes Before a Fall. And we've all heard that before. And here we look at, I should have a picture. There it is. Do you recognize the great temple at Petra? I've been there actually. Been a long time ago, almost probably 40 years. About 40 years ago, my wife and I, newlywed, went to a tour of Israel, and they took us through Petra, and we saw this temple there. It's in Edom, and remember, this prophet is written to the Edomites. And you may also have recognized that this is where the Raiders of the Lost Ark, the Temple of Doom. They used that and filmed that right here. So let's look at the PowerPoint. According to Bullock, 4 other oracles against Edom occur in the prophets. So it wasn't just in one place. Amos, the prophet Amos, he had oracles God gave to him against the Edomites. Isaiah as well, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. So 4 of the locations we see in the Old Testament where God prophesied against the Edomites. So let's look at Obadiah, get an overview. One of the 3 prophetic books that focus on the judgment of Israel's enemies. Nahum, we'll study Nahum in this course, was prophesying against Nineveh, the capital of Assyria. Habakkuk, he prophesied on against Babylon, and Obadiah on Edom, the Edomites. Obadiah is the shortest of the Old Testament books, all of them, not just the prophetic books. Only 21 verses in this prophecy. Very short book, the shortest of the Old Testament. You may want to remember that for a quiz. Obadiah was the earliest of the writing prophets, and he was a contemporary of Elijah, who was not a writing prophet. So he was the earliest of the writing prophets. Obadiah was probably an officer of Ahab's court who hid God's prophets in a cave, and that's recorded in 1 Kings 18:3. The date of writing of this prophecy is thought to be around 848 to 841 BC. Notice the BC dates, instead of like we are in AD, are longer. They're going shorter. So keep that in mind, because this is BC. So they descend and as they go in time. And Dr. Bowman, and I use some of his notes in these PowerPoints, is a longtime professor of our school. Back in those days, it was by different names, but now we're Piedmont Divinity School at Carolina University. Well, he taught for 51 years, and he taught this course for quite a long time, I'm sure, many times. And in his notes, he said this date may be problematic since Obadiah mentions no kings in this letter. And so since the those who think that he was probably, that word is important, probably an officer of Ahab's court, would lean toward the date of 848 to 841. But he said this could be problematic. He is cited by the way, Obadiah is cited by Jeremiah, and Jeremiah we know was a prophet during the days and right before and during the Babylonians' invasion of Judah and Jerusalem. So Ryrie, we'll see later on, also says it's possible it could be there in that time. And here we see that timeline that I was just referring to. This comes from Ryrie's study Bible, and each one of the books we'll see a timeline in Ryrie's study Bible, and that's where I got this from. And so we look at things that from a period of BC 931 to 586, that period of time, and where on this timeline Obadiah falls when the writing of this particular oracle, this prophecy. So the kingdom is divided in 931 BC. That's when Jeroboam and Rehoboam, who followed Solomon as king, the 12 tribes became a civil war. The 10 northern tribes separated from the 2 southern tribes, and it was divided in that period of time, and that was Jeroboam and Rehoboam, and after Solomon finished his reign. And then we see in 848 BC, Elisha, who was not a writing prophet, begins his prophetic ministry. We look at Jehu becomes the king of Israel. When we see Israel here on this, it's referring to the 10 northern tribes after the kingdom had divided. Judah was the 2 southern tribes. Obadiah 840, so you got the question mark that Ryrie has on there, whether it was written around 840 or not, we don't know for sure. It could have been much later during when the Babylonians would come to invade. But Obadiah begins his prophetic ministry maybe around 840 BC. Jeroboam II becomes king of Israel in 794. We see Josiah became the king of Judah, the 2 southern tribes, in 640. Jeremiah, again, we've already mentioned him some, begins his prophetic ministry in 627 BC. And Obadiah begins his prophetic ministry maybe in 586. So we're not sure. There's some debate as to when it was early or late, whether it was 840 or 586, which one of those we're not absolutely sure about. Here's some important points to think about in Obadiah. God is sovereign over the nations. So we should realize that he's sovereign over all of his creation. And when we see nations in Scripture, it usually refers to non-Jewish people, the nations outside of Israel and Judah. But he's sovereign over all of them, including Israel and Judah. We should also see in Obadiah the unique place of Israel among the nations. God's people is unique. They are his covenant people. He made a covenant with them back. We can read about that in Exodus chapter 19 and 20. And those we see how God made a covenant they would be his covenant people, and they agreed, and he would be their God. Thirdly, another point to understand is God is faithful to keep his covenant promises to his covenant people, Israel. God is faithful. The problem is humans are not. Those Jews at some point became unfaithful to him, and God had to use other nations to judge his own covenant people, to bring them back to a right relationship with himself. It's called his way of disciplining them, to bring them out where they would realize they are dependent on him. They need him for not only protection, but blessings. So God is faithful, but we humans, and not just Jews, are many times are not faithful to our God. Pride destroys. Remember the subheading and on the title page, pride comes before destruction. Well, in this prophecy against the Edomites, they were proud. And so God hates a proud look. And we'll see that in this prophecy. And here we have a map, and we see something about the Edomites. They were descendants of Esau. Remember, Esau was the twin brother of Jacob. The Edomites descended from Esau and were in constant conflict with the Jews of Israel, the descendants of Jacob. Remember, Jacob had 12 sons, and remember, Jacob's name was changed to Israel. And if you've studied the Old Testament and other places, after struggling with the angel of the Lord, wrestling with him, Jacob's name was changed to Israel. And Jacob had 12 sons, and the 12 sons became the 12 tribes of Israel, their descendants. They settled in Mount Seir, the Edomites now, a mountainous region south of the Dead Sea. And let me get my marker. There it is right there. I also want to get another marker. If I could just give me 1 second. And there we go. And so you see down here Mount Seir, right in this area where the arrow's pointing. And the Dead Sea is right here. And Petra was the capital of the Edomites. And remember, we saw that picture of the temple there in Petra. And this is, of course, a Ryrie Study Bible. You may have a different translation, and it may not be the same same page that was on in this Bible. But nevertheless, here you see where Edom is, right there. Now, here we have on this slide a short list of past conflicts between the Edomites and Israel. So, and then this is why God is basically having this proclamation against the Edomites. But they have often been in conflict against God's covenant people. And so let's look. They rejected Moses' request to pass through their land in Numbers chapter 20, verses 14 through 20. This is when the children of Israel, after the Exodus, was on their journey to the Promised Land, and they had to pass through this territory where the Edomites live. And Moses had asked if he could pass through, and they rejected. They didn't want them to pass through their land. They opposed King Saul. That's the very first king, remember, of the nation in 1 Samuel 14:47. So they were in opposition to the Jews in the days of Saul when he was appointed king. They fought against David, who took Saul's place in 1 Kings, we see. And so they were enemies of the Jews then. They opposed Solomon, David's son, who replaced David on the throne. So we see the first 3 kings, Saul, David, and Solomon, they all were enemies of the Jews. We can think in our day in the United States of America, we have those who oppose us, particularly the communist countries, particularly the uh, radical Islamic terrorists have opposed us, and we 9/11 is still famous because of that. But we have our enemies today too, so you can get an idea of what they were going through with the Edomites. Uh, the Edomites opposed Jehoshaphat, according to Second Chronicles. They continued throughout time to oppose the Jews. They rebelled against Jehoram, another king, according to Second Chronicles. Very close in proximity to the previous chapter. This is 21. Second Chronicles 20 was Jehoshaphat. So you see they have a history of opposing God's covenant people. Now, before I look at this, let me back up just a second. It's important for us to realize that when God made a covenant, and let's back up to that real quick. When he made a covenant with Abraham, it was an unconditional covenant. And he said, I will repeat these promises that I'm making to you to bless you, to your descendants. And it was repeated to Isaac, and then it was repeated to Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel, and it was repeated to the 12 tribes. And part of the promise that God made to Abraham that was passed down to his descendants, which became the great nation of Israel, was that he said, I will bless those who bless you, and I'll curse those who curse you. And here we see in this oracle of Obadiah, these people, as you see here, in all these conflicts who have opposed God's covenant people, God's given a prophecy that, he's going to bring curses on them because of how they've treated his covenant people. Now keep that in mind. So now, as we've already alluded to, the date of it is questionable. We're not sure exactly, concretely, without a shadow of a doubt, exactly when it was written. The date of Obadiah is really, we can get a probable one we think it might be one rather than the other by looking at the invasion that's addressed in the book of Obadiah. There's an invasion and listed in it, and it lists four primary. In Ryder's Bible, he said there are four primary invasions against Jerusalem. So which one of these four primary invasions against Jerusalem is the one that Obadiah mentions in his book? Okay. Here's the first one. Shishak, the king of Egypt during the days of Rehoboam, remember the kingdom had been split. Shishak during those days attacked, invaded the land. Secondly, and it's in bold print because this is the one that we think is more probable, or at least Ryrie does. The Philistines and Arabians during the days of King Jehoram. In 848 to 840. Another invasion, King Joash of Israel, during his reign, during the reign of Amaziah in 790. But they were called strangers. And Babylon in 605, 586. So we see four different invasions against Jerusalem. King Shishak of Egypt, the Philistines and Arabians in the days of King Jehoram, King Joash of Israel, which would be the 10 northern tribes during the reign of Amaziah of the southern tribe. He came against Jerusalem because Jerusalem's in the south and in Judah. And fourthly, Babylon, when Nebuchadnezzar came, three different deportations, by the way. That's why it says 605 to 586. His armies came three different times against Jerusalem. The most likely invasion described, which we have in bold, and Obadiah was the second on the list, namely the Philistines and the Arabians. Ryrie says it might be either 2 or 4. So Ryrie said possibly it could be 4. That's why we had 2 different things on the timeline that we showed from Ryrie, the Ryrie Bible earlier. Now, here we have some more content that I got from Dr. Bowman's notes, and he came up with some practical lessons from studying this oracle, this prophecy of Obadiah. God gave Obadiah against the Edomites, and he found some practical applications for us. Pride goes before destruction, and the Edomites were certainly prideful, and we'll look at that. We have some verses out of the. This is a very short. There's only so many verses, and not even but one chapter. So we will look at some of those, and see their pride. But pride goes. God's fixing to judge them because of their pride. Oh, here I got it here, right here. Let's read it. Verses 3 through 9. Let's see that. The arrogance, this is a New American Standard Version, by the way. The arrogance of your heart, and this is God's oracle against the Edomites. The arrogance of your heart, you Edomites, has deceived you. You live in the clefts of the rock. Remember seeing that temple that was cleft out of the limestone? In the loftiness of your dwelling place, they had caves in those limestone cliffs. Who say in your heart, who will bring me down to earth? That's the way they thought about themselves. They thought nobody could conquer them. Though you build high like the eagle in those high cliffs where they lived in those caves, though you set your nest among the stars, that's their caves. From there I will bring you down, declares the Lord. You think nobody can conquer you. He says, if thieves came to you, if robbers by night, oh how you will be ruined. Would they not steal only until they had enough? If grape gatherers came to you, would they not leave some gleanings? Oh, how Esau, see, they're descendants of Esau, the Edomite, will be ransacked. He's talking about them being ransacked, their destruction. And his hidden treasures will be found. All the men allied with you will send you forth to the border, your allies. They won't be there for you. And the men at peace with you will receive you and overpower you. They who eat your bread will set an ambush for you. There is no understanding in him. Will I not on that day, declares the Lord, when you see that, when he's talking about that day, he's talking about the day of the Lord, a time of judgment. Destroy wise men from Edom and understanding from the mountain of Esau. Then, Mount Seir, remember. Then your mighty men will be dismayed, O Teman, so that everyone may be cut off from the mountain of Esau by slaughter. So pride, God's going to judge them and destroy them because of their pride and because they treated his covenant people, the Jews. And we saw in the previous slide how they did that repeatedly throughout time. Sinful acts follow sinful attitudes. And we see verses 10 through 12. And so if you have a sinful attitude, then therefore you're going to act on it. And that's what they did, the Edomites, against the Jews. Because of violence to your brother Jacob refers to the Jews. Esau was the twin of Jacob, and those descendants, the Edomites, and we saw how they have oppressed and opposed the Jews. You will be covered with shame. He's talking about the Edomites. And because of your violence, sinful acts. They had a sinful attitude. They hated the Jews. So what did they do? They opposed them. They were rejoiced when somebody else did them harm. He says, and you will be cut off forever. Wow. On the day, when we see keep seeing that word, and you'll see it in other prophecies, it's referring to God's judgment. Not all, and the day has a twofold aspect: a day of judgment, and then also after that, we see a restoration to the Jews, to God's people. So the day has maybe a blessing aspect and a discipline aspect as far as the Jews are concerned. It's a curse as far as the enemies of, of the Jews are concerned. Foreigners entered his gate. Strangers carried his wealth, and foreigners entered his gate, talking about the Edomite, and cast lots. I'm sorry, let me start at verse 11 again. On the day that you stood aloof, talking about the Edomite, on the day that strangers carried off his wealth and foreigners entered his gate and cast lots for Jerusalem, you too were as one of them. In other words, you were happy that this happened to the Jews in Jerusalem. Do not gloat over your brothers. Don't gloat over their misfortune. And do not rejoice over the sons of Judah in the day of their destruction, when God disciplining them. Yes, do not boast in the day of their distress. So sinful acts follow sinful attitudes. And as I am recording this, and I know hopefully I'll be able to use this recording for other times that I teach it in the future. But right now, in 2023, we see the Islamic terrorists have attacked Israel in our day, and there's a war going on over there. And the Islamic terrorists there, Hamas, their goal, they've stated it, and it's not hidden, they seek to wipe the Jews and nation of Israel off of the face of the earth so that they would cease to exist. And that's their goal. And so that's why they attacked Israel. Now, what a man sows, he also shall reap. So again, we see here God's judging the Edomites because of their attitude. They hate the Jews. They gloat when something bad happens to them, and they would love to do it themselves to them because they hate them. And God says, if you have sinful acts, follow sinful attitudes, and what a man sows, you also reap. These are some practical applications that Dr. Bowman is bringing out. Pride goes before destruction. Look at this one. This is providential lessons that we can learn from Obadiah. The sovereign Lord, and so God is creator, and he is sovereign, and he's omnipotent, and he's omniscient, he knows all things. He rules over all nations and uses nations to destroy Edom. And that's what we see in this prophecy. He's going to use other nations to destroy Edom. Look at the first two verses. The vision of Obadiah, thus says the Lord God concerning Edom. We have heard a report from the Lord. An envoy has been sent among the nations, saying, arise, let us go against her for battle. Behold, I will make you small among the nations. You are greatly despised because of what you've done to God's covenant people. God chose Israel over Esau. Jacob desired the blessings, the covenant blessings that were being passed down. Esau sold it to his brother for some porridge, some soup. He regretted it later on, but he didn't really. That wasn't. He was strong, a mighty man, and he thought he didn't need God. Look at verse 10. Because of violence to your brother Jacob, you will be covered with shame, and you will be cut off forever. And we saw all those occasions in history earlier, in the early history of the Jews. But on Mount Zion, there will be those who escape, and it will be holy. and the house of Jacob will possess their possessions. See, you see here God pronouncing in this verse 17, God will bless his covenant people. Mount Zion is where Jerusalem is. That's where the temple was built later on. Uh, uh, actually, it was already been built by Solomon, but it's in the southern kingdom in Jerusalem. Verse 20, and the exiles of this host of the sons of Israel, who are among the Canaanites as far as Zarephath, and the exiles of Jerusalem, who are in Sepharad, will possess the cities of the Negev. And so we see God predicting and seeing he will bless the Jews and he will bring curses and lessons. God providentially, see, this is providentially, God will take care of the enemies there in his time after he's disciplined his own people for their sin. And here are prophetic lessons. Prophecy refers to things yet future in the days when Obadiah wrote this. So it was a future in the sense of the context of here is the time when Obadiah wrote. So it was future from that day he was writing this prophecy against the Edomites. some prophetic things we can see here. Christ will come again and judge Edom and all nations who mistreat Israel. That's in verse 15, 18, and 21. Christ is just a Greek reference to a Messiah, Jewishness. They would say Messiah. We in our Bibles we have Christ in the New Testament. We see Messiah, and they mention much in the Old, but it means the Anointed One. It means the same thing, just different languages. And we see the scripture that supports. We see verse 15. For the day of the Lord, remember when I say when you see the day, it refers to, could be God's judgment, but it also can be God's blessing, a restoration to his covenant people that he made those covenant promises to. For the day of the Lord draws near on all the nations. We see in Obadiah, as you have done, it will be done to you. Your dealings will return on your own head. It's called retribution. God judges in like manner. If you have oppressed his covenant people, then you will be judged in like manner. That's what this is saying. So it's called retribution. And when Jesus comes back, the Messiah, when he comes back to earth, when he comes again, remember, Jesus had two comings. And the Old Testament prophets, I'll say this right up front. None of the Old Testament prophets, it was not revealed to them that there would be two comings of the Messiah. They didn't see that. They didn't see that the Jews, when Jesus came the first time, would reject him and said, we have no king but Caesar. And that there would be a postponement of all these promises to restore Israel and to bless Israel. Many of those have not been fulfilled. And so none of these Old Testament prophets that we're studying in this course, none of them saw that. So keep that in mind. Verse 18. We're still looking at the prophetic lessons. Then the house of Jacob will be a fire, and the house of Joseph a flame. But the house of Esau will be as stubble. And they will set them on fire and consume them, so that there will be no survivor of the house of Esau, for the Lord has spoken. So we're seeing God predicting a future doom for the Edomites. Verse 21. The deliverers will ascend Mount Zion. That's where it's in Jerusalem. That's where the temple was built, to judge the mountain of Esau, Mount Seir, and the kingdom will be the Lord's. So all this is yet future. That was Obadiah was predicting in verse 21. Now we see verse 19 and 20. Israel gets Edom's land in the millennium, in the 1,000-year messianic reign is the 1,000-year reign of Christ on the earth when he comes back the second time. That's when he will actually reign on the earth. It's called the Messianic Kingdom, and it lasts for 1,000 years. Millennium means 1,000 years. So let's read about it. What we can see here in these verses and how it relates to that. Verse 19, then those of the Negev, that's down where the Edomites live, will possess the mountain of Esau, and those of the Shephelah, the Philistines' plain, and also possess the territory of Ephraim, that's the northern 10 tribes, and the territory of Samaria, that's the northern 10 tribes, and Benjamin will possess Gilead, and the exiles of this host of the sons of Israel who are among the exiles, who are among the Canaanites as far the exiles who are among the Canaanites as far as Zarephath, and the exiles who are in Sepharad will possess the cities of the Negev. So God, we see in the future, they're going to be destroyed, and who's going to possess that land where they live, where the Edomites live? It will be the Jews. And that's what he's predicting will happen. Survey outline. Here's an outline of this little tiny book. Revelation of Edom's destruction, verses 1 through 9. We see a declaration of judgment, a description of judgment, the reason for Edom's destruction, wickedness described, warnings declared, the result of the day of the Lord, retribution. That's what I'm saying. God will judge the Edomites in like manner of how they oppressed his covenant people. And the nation of Israel will be restored. We read those verses. We just got through reading them, where the Israelites will one day occupy their land. It was a yet future time from when this prophecy was given in that day of Obadiah. So, the revelation, that's the first thing here. I just put it up here for you. We read a lot of these verses already. The reason, so this is basically the first 9 verses, reveals that God is pronouncing that, hey, people think that God's not in control of events. He is. He's telling the future in that day, in Obadiah's day, of the destruction of the Edomites. And the reason is why? Because they had did violence to your brother. We've read some of these verses because of your violence to your brother Jacob. And then the result, we read a lot of that in the last slide of the day of the Lord. And so, and I think it's important. Verse 21, let's look at the very last verse. The deliverers will ascend Mount Zion, that's in Jerusalem, okay, where the temple is, to judge the mountain of Esau, and the kingdom will be the Lord's. Because the Lord is who? The Lord Jesus Christ is the Messiah. And when he comes the second time, his kingdom will be established on the earth.